Before the story begins, make sure to like, subscribe, and let me know. What time do you usually watch videos? And don't forget to suggest the next story or content you'd like to see. Story 1. The Whistler Outside My Window. I never used to be afraid of the dark. Growing up, I was the kind of kid who loved thunderstorms, who begged to go on night hikes with my dad, who could fall asleep even if the house creaked and groaned in the stillness. But all of that changed one summer when something or someone started whistling outside my bedroom window. It started on a humid July night. The cicadas were loud, the air was sticky, and I had my window cracked open to let in what little breeze there was. I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone when I heard it, a sharp, deliberate whistle. At first, I thought it was a bird, but then I realized the rhythm was unmistakably human. It was a short tune, something simple, like a child trying to remember the first notes of a song. 3 notes, pause. 3 notes, pause. Over and over again. I froze. The glow of my phone screen suddenly too bright against the shadows of my room. The whistle wasn't far away. It was right outside my window. My house wasn't in a crowded neighborhood. We lived on a quiet cul-de-sac where the nearest house was still a good stretch away. For someone to be outside my window at that hour was wrong. I waited, holding my breath, convinced it had to be my imagination. But then it came again. 3 notes. Pause. Louder this time. Closer. My first instinct was to shut the window, but that meant I'd have to step toward it. Instead, I reached over and turned off my phone screen, plunging myself into darkness. Maybe if they couldn't see me, they'd go away. Minutes passed. The whistle stopped. I lay there, sweating, straining my ears until I finally convinced myself it had been nothing. Maybe a neighbor's TV, maybe a kid messing around, maybe just the wind carrying sound in a weird way. Eventually, exhaustion won, and I drifted off to sleep. The next night, it happened again. Same tune, same timing, but this time it went on longer. I pulled my blanket over my head like a child, heart pounding, every muscle in my body tense. I thought about running to my parents' room, but the idea of walking past that window terrified me. I told myself I'd mention it in the morning, but when daylight came, it all felt silly. I didn't want to sound paranoid. Night 3 was worse. The whistle started earlier, just after I climbed into bed. 3 notes, pause. 3 notes, pause. Then silence. I sat up, clutching my pillow, staring at the shadowed outline of my curtains swaying in the night breeze. Then slowly, the sound changed. The whistling stopped, and instead, I heard the faint crunch of footsteps on gravel, right beneath my window. That was the first time I screamed. My dad burst into my room, baseball bat in hand, my mom behind him dialing the police. They searched outside but found nothing. No footprints in the dirt, no broken branches, nothing to prove anyone had been there. The police arrived, did a sweep of the property, and told us it was probably some prankster. Kids these days, one of them said. But I knew. I had heard those footsteps. After that, my dad locked all the windows every night. He left the porch light on and even bought a motion sensor floodlight for the backyard. For a few nights, things were quiet, and I started to believe maybe it had ended. Then, one night, the whistle returned. I was lying in bed, light from the hallway seeping through the crack under my door, when the 3 notes floated in again. This time, though, it wasn't outside the window. It was farther away. Still outside, but moving. The whistle would drift, pause, then pick up again from another angle, as if someone was circling the house, whistling as they went. I bolted upright, panic flooding me. My parents' room was at the opposite end of the house, and I was too terrified to leave my bed. I curled up, trembling, listening as the whistling slowly made its way around, stopping now and then beneath different windows. Sometimes it was faint, sometimes startlingly close, but it never stopped. Not until dawn. The next morning, my dad found something. Underneath my bedroom window, pressed into the soil, were footprints, bare feet, long, narrow, with deep impressions in the mud. Whoever had been there hadn't been wearing shoes. That was enough for the police to come again. This time more serious. They combed the woods behind our house, set up a patrol in the neighborhood for a week, even suggested we install cameras. My parents did, but the footage never captured anything. Just empty night, the swaying of trees, an occasional raccoon. Still, the whistling didn't stop. Sometimes it came from the woods, faint but persistent, carrying on the night air like a warning. Other times it was right against the glass, so close I swore I could see the faint outline of a face in the window when the floodlight clicked on. I stopped sleeping. Every night, I sat awake in my bed, clutching my phone, waiting for the sound. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. The whistling started just after midnight, soft at first, then louder, as if whoever it was wanted me to know they were back. I grabbed my phone, opened the camera app, and crept toward the window. My heart felt like it would explode, but I pulled the curtain aside and snapped a picture through the glass. The flash lit up the yard for a fraction of a second, and in that second, I saw him. A man, tall and gaunt, standing just a few feet from the window. His skin looked pale, almost gray in the sudden light, his eyes wide and unblinking, his lips pursed as though frozen mid-whistle. He didn't flinch, didn't move, just stared right at me. I screamed for my parents, but by the time they came running, the yard was empty. The photo on my phone, though, captured him clearly. The police finally had proof. They took the photo, promised they'd investigate, but weeks turned into months and nothing came of it. We moved not long after. My parents said it was because of my dad's job, but I knew the real reason. They were as afraid as I was. Even now, years later, I sleep with my windows shut tight. No open curtains, no cracks for the night air to slip through. But sometimes, when the world is quiet and I'm lying in bed trying to drift off, I swear I hear it again. 3 notes. Pause. 3 notes. And I know he's still out there somewhere, waiting outside someone else's window. Story 2. The tune that followed me home. I first noticed it one evening in late autumn, when the air outside carried that faint, crisp bite that made you feel like the year was coming to a close. I had just left my friend Marcus's apartment after a long night of studying. His place was only about a 10-minute walk from mine, through a stretch of quiet suburban streets lit only by dim orange lamps that left more shadows than light. As I walked, I kept hearing a sound, faint at first, like the high, reedy notes of a whistle. The tune wasn't anything familiar. It wasn't a pop song, or a nursery rhyme, or even something that could easily be hummed along to. It was wandering, uneven, rising and falling with no real rhythm, yet oddly deliberate, as though someone were playing a song only they knew. I stopped and looked around. A couple of cars passed, their headlights sweeping across the pavement, but no one was there. The whistling faded, then returned again, this time seeming closer, as though just behind me. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe someone with their window cracked open. Maybe the wind slipping between buildings in a way that mimicked a tune. Still, I quickened my pace, eager to reach the safety of my apartment. But that night, when I lay in bed, I swore I heard it again. Faint, almost like it had slipped into my dreams. The whistling rose, lingered for a moment, and then faded into silence. The next day passed without incident, though I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was one of those things you tell yourself you imagined, but it keeps clinging to you anyway. By the time evening fell, I had nearly convinced myself it had been a trick of exhaustion. That was when it returned. I was walking home from class, earbuds in, listening to music to drown out my own thoughts. Yet, beneath the sound of drums and guitars, I heard it. That same uneven whistle, weaving its way between the notes of the song. I yanked my earbuds out, heart pounding, and stood still under the weak glow of a street lamp. Nothing. The whistling had stopped, but the moment I started walking again, I heard it once more. I forced myself to keep going. My apartment building finally came into view, and with it a rush of relief. But just as I reached for the door, I realized something. The whistling hadn't stayed behind. It had followed me. Inside, I locked the door, double-checked the windows, even pulled the curtains tight. I turned on the TV to fill the silence, but no matter how loud I made it, the faint tune threaded its way through. Always distant, always just out of reach, yet unmistakable. It wasn't until that third night that the dread truly sank in. I had fallen asleep with the television still murmuring in the background when a sharp, clear note jolted me awake. My room was dark, the air heavy with silence. And then it came again, that same drifting, meandering tune, but now closer. This time it wasn't outside. It was in the apartment. I sat up, barely daring to breathe. The whistle wound its way through the air, circling like it was searching for me. My skin prickled with cold. I whispered to myself that it wasn't real. that it couldn't be real, but the sound grew louder, sharper, as if mocking my denial. In a panic, I flicked on the lamp. The room lit up, empty, familiar, safe. The whistling stopped. But the next night, it returned. And the night after that. Always when I was alone. Always when the silence deepened enough to let it through. It didn't matter if the TV was on, or music was blaring, or I pressed my hands over my ears. Somehow, the tune always found its way to me. I stopped walking home after dark. I stayed at friends' houses, even booked a cheap motel once, just to see if distance would break whatever was happening. It didn't matter. The whistling followed. It found me in every room, every bed, every silence. Sometimes it came soft and playful, like someone amusing themselves in the dark. Other times it came sharp and shrill, piercing through whatever thin veil of comfort I tried to build around myself. And worst of all, sometimes it paused, as though whoever was making it was holding their breath, listening for mine. I've told no one. How do you explain something like this without sounding insane? A tune following you everywhere, one that no one else can hear. But now, as I write this, it's grown bolder. I no longer only hear it in the quiet. Tonight, I heard it over the voices of my friends while we were out eating. No one else seemed to notice. They laughed and carried on while I froze, the notes curling around me like invisible fingers. And just a few minutes ago, as I locked up my apartment for the night, the whistle began again. Not faint, not distant, but clear and strong, echoing through the room as though the whistler were standing right beside me. I can't escape it. The tune has followed me home, and it refuses to let go. Story 3. The Midnight Whistle in the Woods. I grew up in a small town surrounded by endless stretches of pine and oak forest, the kind of place where kids were taught early to respect the woods, because the trees stretched farther than the eye could see, and once you lost your bearings, you might never come out again. We all had stories about strange sounds and flickering lights among the pines, but there was one tale in particular that always unnerved me. The whistle. Locals spoke of it in hushed tones, as though saying too much would invite it closer. Some claimed it was a hunter who died decades ago, forever wandering the woods, whistling the tune he played to keep his spirits up. Others said it was older, tied to something inhuman that mimicked the sounds of people to lure the unwary into the trees. I had always brushed it off as folklore meant to keep kids from sneaking out at night. But then, one summer evening, I learned that the whistle was real. It was July, the air heavy and restless, and I had gone camping with 2 friends, Tyler and Jamie. We were 17, old enough to think we couldn't be scared by campfire stories, and reckless enough to test the limits of every old warning. We set up our tent deep in the forest, far from the well-marked trails, because we thought being off the map was adventurous. The night fell fast, as it always did in the woods, with shadows layering over each other until the trees were just black silhouettes against a darker sky. We lit a fire, roasted marshmallows, and laughed about the silly ghost stories our parents told. But as the flames burned lower and the night stretched quiet, something shifted. The woods went silent, eerily so. No crickets, no wind, just the pop of the fire. And then, faint but unmistakable, came the sound. A whistle. It was soft, almost playful, drifting through the trees. The 3 of us froze. The tune was simple, but oddly deliberate, like a lullaby twisted just slightly off-key. Tyler laughed nervously, trying to play it off. "Probably some guy out here camping too," he said, but his voice cracked. We listened. The whistle rose again, this time from the opposite direction, and then again from somewhere else entirely. The sound wasn't moving naturally. It was appearing in different places, as though circling us. Jamie whispered, It's close." We huddled near the fire, pretending that light could protect us. My stomach churned with dread, though I tried to be rational. Maybe the sound carried strangely in the forest. Maybe echoes bounced between the trees. But then the whistle grew louder, clearer, like it was only a few feet beyond the glow of our fire. I'll never forget the way it sounded up close, sharp, controlled, and intentional. It wasn't random. Whoever, or whatever it was, it wanted us to hear. Tyler grabbed a flashlight and shined it toward the sound. The beam swept across the trees, but there was nothing there. Just dense shadows and tangled underbrush. The whistling stopped. We held our breath. Then, slowly, a new whistle began, this time mimicking a tune we had been humming earlier by the fire. The realization hit all three of us at once. It had been listening. Jamie bolted for the tent, zipping himself inside like thin fabric could keep danger out. Tyler and I stayed by the fire, though neither of us could move. The whistle drew closer, weaving between the trees until it felt like it was just behind us. "Who's there?" Tyler called out, his voice trembling. No answer, only the whistle, now louder, sharper, like it was mocking him. Something inside me snapped. "We have to go," I whispered, grabbing his arm. "We can't stay here." We dragged Jamie out of the tent and hurried down the faint path toward the road. The firelight faded, swallowed by the forest, and the darkness around us grew thick. But the whistle followed, always just behind us, sometimes to the left, sometimes to the right, as though it moved faster than we could run. Branches clawed at our clothes, roots snagged our feet. I swear I felt the breath of something cold on the back of my neck. But we didn't stop. We didn't dare. Finally, after what felt like hours, we burst out of the woods and onto the gravel road leading back into town. The whistle stopped instantly. The night sounds returned, the wind in the trees, the hum of crickets, like nothing had happened. We stumbled to Tyler's house in silence, too shaken to speak. None of us wanted to admit it, but we all knew we had experienced something impossible. The next morning, in the light of day, we convinced ourselves it had been some prankster, or maybe just our imaginations playing tricks. But that night, lying in my bed with the window cracked open, I heard it again. That same whistle, soft, deliberate, rising from the woods beyond my backyard. I slammed the window shut, heart racing, but the sound carried even through the glass. Faint, taunting, promising it would never really leave. I never went camping in those woods again. And to this day, when the world falls quiet late at night, I sometimes hear it. Just a single sharp whistle, like a reminder. You can run from the woods, but the whistle can follow you anywhere. No matter where they went, no matter how far they ran, the whistle always found its way back to them. Maybe it was just an echo carried by the wind, or maybe it was something older, something that doesn't stop once it's chosen you. If you ever hear a tune in the distance, one that grows louder the more you try to ignore it, be careful, because sometimes the sound isn't just a sound. Sometimes it's already following you.